Welcome to the IDP Trade Show. I'm your host, Steve Falco. We got Jeff. Thank you, Jeff, for joining us from the IDP Show. I haven't seen you in quite a bit. I'm excited to talk some trades with you on the IDP Trade Show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I was looking forward to this. It's trade season 24/7 in Dynasty League, so this is one of my favorite things to do. So thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So, I mean, the thing is right before the NFL draft, this is when leagues start to get out of their slumber, right? You start to see more moves happening. You even see moves happening in the NFL. We're a little bit light on the trades. So if you have some trades, put some in the comments below. Happy to be able to provide you our insight. If not, maybe we could talk a little NFL trades as well, even though it's not defensive related. But nevertheless, we've got some trades that were submitted. So why don't we get those started here? So we got our first one. All right. So Chase Quam, he submitted a offer here, and he says, I was thinking about acquiring Patrick Queen in an 11-11 Superflex Sleeper Big 3 league. How much capital would you move him for? So, Jeff, what are your thoughts there? Your initial thoughts. So this Chase is interested in Patrick Queen. Let's talk about first what your thoughts are as for Patrick Queen as the player, and then he was thinking someone like Jahan Dotson. So what do you think about what he has to say there?
Probably now is not the best time to be trying to acquire a player like Patrick Queen. He's probably going to be at peak value. He just had some positive buzz about him. He traded to a new team. He's the new shiny toy. So it's probably not the most ideal time to try to acquire a player like Patrick Queen. But if you're only going to have to give up a player like Jahan Dotson, who's a nice shiny toy, but if you can acquire a player like Patrick Queen and his caliber, I am all on board. Jahan Dotson's a great prospect. He's been supposedly going to be the player for the Commanders for the last couple of years. It just hasn't come to fruition. And I feel a player like Jahan Dotson is probably more replaceable or easily replaceable than a player of like Patrick Queen's caliber. Patrick Queen has shown that he is a legit top 12 linebacker season in and season out, whereas Jahan Dotson has shown flashes. He's going to probably be dealing with a rookie quarterback, and so he's got growing pains with that. Terry McLaurin is still there, so I just feel that like if I can upgrade to a player like Patrick Queen's caliber for a player like Dotson, I'm all on board. So
this one's a very interesting one for me, and I'm trying to unpack it. So first off, I'm curious, and Chase, if you're listening, I'd be happy to hear your thoughts on this. I'm a little bit skittish on Patrick Queen to begin with. Obviously, he had a, resurgence, we'd call it, this past season when people thought that maybe he was somewhat of a bust. If I'm not mistaken, the Ravens declined his fifth-year option, if I'm not mistaken. So he was a former first-round pick. Usually when you see that happening, it's not really a good sign. But he played really well next to Roquan Smith. Now he goes to Pittsburgh, and you got Cameron Hayward, who's just a mauler in the inside. So what's his tackle opportunities? Plus, he's playing along the likes of, I believe they still have, do they still have Cole Holcomb? I think they still have Cole Holcomb.
yeah, but he's dealing with a really serious knee injury. He might be done. So
You think it'll be done?
That's the rumor mill right now. Like it's a pretty significant knee injury, and I think that's part of the reason why the Pittsburgh Steelers went out and acquired Patrick Queen. They brought him in from a division rival. There's already that bad blood, and Patrick Queen has kind of put up some locker room material already too. Like he's kind of been posting some things like I want to play the villain, and so
I saw that.
Kind of embracing this role of his. So,
and then they also brought in another linebacker, I believe. I'm trying to. The name escapes me, but I think they also brought in another linebacker. Unless I'm remembering everything is a Landon Roberts. Maybe that was last year that I'm thinking about. Do you remember if they brought in anybody else?
Let's see.
I'm testing your knowledge here, Jeff.
Yeah. It's making me look. I know that Queen was the big acquisition on that side of the ball. I think the biggest thing with their defense, I think they're going to kind of get retooled. I know that they have Cole Holcomb, but he's like that piece. I think you're right with Landon Roberts. And they don't have really much behind them, like a Mark Robinson. He's like kind of a shiny piece, but last year they were decimated on the defensive side of the ball, not only with linebackers but their secondary, and they just were
Landon
like
Roberts was
rolling.
the guy.
Yeah,
Yep.
yep, they were
Hmm.
just rolling through people. So, no offense to Landon Roberts, but he's just kind of he's a jag. He's just a guy out there playing, and in IDP, that's sometimes all you need is just to have that guy making tackles. But I think a player like Queen's caliber. I don't think that they're going to draft heavily on in the linebacker side of the ball in this draft, and there really isn't that top tier talent in this year's draft at the linebacker position. They have a
No.
couple really strong prospects, but I don't see the Pittsburgh Steelers being one of the teams that are going to invest in that position. And a chance to get like a player like Peyton Wilson or Edgerrin, So I don't see that as an option for
Yeah.
them. Yeah, so I think Queen is going to be the clear cut LB1 there. Very little for competition and stuff like that. And you mentioned Cam Hayward. Their defensive line is pretty outstanding when you figure you got TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Cam Hayward in the middle. They got the guys that they drafted out of Wisconsin this last year.
Yeah.
Kenan Benton, yeah. And so I think their front line is loaded, which is a great thing for a linebacker because that keeps them super clean, able to make tackles. They don't have to fight off blockers and things like that. So I think Queen is really, he's a buy high player in my opinion. He's one of those guys that you're going to have to pay for, but you kind of know what you're getting. He's a player that has scored really well the last 2 seasons. He's an ascending player when it comes to PFF ranks. He's close to or at 100 tackles in each of the last 3 seasons. So he's just, like you kind of know what you're getting there. And like a player with Jahan Dotson, I don't know what I'm getting. So for me, it's an easy decision. But
Interesting. I'd be more apt to sell high on Patrick Queen. I'm nervous about the landing spot, to be honest with you. I mean, I can't remember the last time a Steelers linebacker was in the top 12, let again the top 24. It's been a long time. It's just that defense doesn't produce it.
I thought the same thing, and it was Cole Holcomb like 3 seasons ago, so he had a really good season a couple seasons ago. But you're right, there hasn't been the caliber, even with high draft. They have drafted like players like Devin Bush and stuff like that, first round, who was expected to be the guy and just never really materialized. And now he's like on his third or fourth team, and things like that. So I totally get the apprehension on a player like Queen. But I think at the cost for me personally, I think if I can get a player of Queen's caliber, to go ahead and do that. And
so I'm going to circle back here. I'm going to circle back, Jeff. We got a comment here. I want to chime in with a comment here. I will chime back to give you my opinion on what I think I would do with Patrick Queen for Jahan Dotson. But we got here, David says, David, thanks for joining the show. We got a 12-team Superflex PPR non-tight end premium start 10 offense 13 IDP. You trade the 203 Harold Landry and Alex Highsmith for Cortland Sutton and Aiden Hutchinson. This is a big deal here, Jeff. What are your thoughts here?
It is Aiden Hutchinson's clearly the best player in this trade, without a doubt. The thing is how many you're starting a 12-team Superflex, non-PPR, you start 13. So that's a pretty deep league. I would almost entertain this trade because the 203 is kind of a question mark. You're maybe going to get like your maybe you'll have the first edge player off the board of your choosing, and whether that's going to be Dallas Turner, if you believe in Dallas Turner, depending on his landing spot. Is Dallas Turner and Alex Highsmith equal to Aiden Hutchinson? Harold Landry is a throw-in piece for me, so it really comes down to where the gap between Aiden Hutchinson and Highsmith is for David. Obviously, it's a huge upgrade from Hutchinson from Highsmith, but it'd be interesting, David, to know your offensive starters. Like, is Cortland Sutton going to be counted on as a weekly starter? Because if he is, that's also a pretty scary proposition too, because Denver's offense isn't looking like it's going to set the world on fire.
No.
So if he's kind of being counted on as a piece, like a weekly contributor, maybe you're better off keeping Highsmith and drafting for need at the 203. Maybe you're going to get Dallas Turner and he becomes the next Aiden Hutchinson. If he lands in a place like Atlanta or Chicago, those are great landing spots. He's going to step in right away, playing opposite of in Chicago. playing opposite of a DL1 where he doesn't have to come in and step in and be the guy right away. I think that's a great spot. Atlanta, he's going to get plenty of run. He's not going to have to worry about snap counts or anything. Like, if he's going to be a top 10 draft pick, he's going to definitely play a ton of snaps. So it'd be interesting, David, to hear if you're counting on Sutton to be a weekly contributor for you. If so, I'm going to lean against doing this trade.
So I'm trying to wrap my head around this 203. So it's a 12-team looking at Superflex and PPR. So you were probably saying off the bat, we've got Harrison, Neighbors, Adunze, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, probably Drake May, Brock Bowers. We're at 7 right there. I'm assuming who else do you think is in that? Brian Thomas probably as well is going to be in there. That's 8.
Yeah, we're going to see some running backs sneak into the back end here, especially with landing spot. There's going to be some of those players that are going to, who don't very appeal right now, but definitely with landing spot are going to become a little more appealing. You're probably going to have a Caleb Williams and a Jaden Daniels being drafted somewhere in that range too.
Do you think McCarthy gets in the first round?
I personally don't have a first round rookie grade on him. Possibly though in a super flex
or Penix.
Again, landing spot dependent. Like playing in that super flex, all of a sudden that kind of changes things. That 203 in a super flex becomes a little more interesting because you're going to have probably 5 quarterbacks off the board by the time you get to the 12th pick. Yeah, and that 203 12th pick could be a really juicy wide receiver. Could be a nice running back. Maybe even, a Peyton Wilson type of player, depending on the scoring. It's just,
Yeah, it depends on your IDP scoring, but I think you might have a shot at Jared Verse or Dallas Turner or Peyton Wilson. Like, those guys are going to be – this is probably, in my view, from a draft class standpoint, this is probably, since I've been doing this now for the past 5 years, this might be the lightest defensive class I've seen, in my view. Very heavy on the offense, especially in the receivers. I mean, very, very heavy. I've been kind of waffling on this. I think it's a pretty fair trade overall. I'm not Cortland Sutton is kind of there's no quarterback to really work with the ball with him, so I'm a little concerned about that. Aiden Hutchinson. So then it comes down to it's Aiden and it. See, I'm a little higher on Landry than you are. I think Landry's a little bit under radar. I don't think I do this trade. I really don't. I think in a 12-team league with 13 IDP, you're probably starting 2 edges, if not 3. Landry and Highsmith are a really good combination. You're gonna and you're still on the younger side. So in my view, it's like you're gonna get Aiden Hutchinson, but then who do you have in the depth to replace Highsmith or Landry? And I think that 203, you might be able to get a guy like Xavier Worthy or Adonai Mitchell or Lab McConkey if you really want a receiver who's much better off than Sutton. So to me, it's like, okay, I'd rather have the 203 than Sutton. And then it's Landry and Highsmith, who I think are kind of in that maybe like, I think in my rankings, I have them at the edge defender. I think they're around tier 3, tier 4. So to me, you're trading a tier 3, tier 4 player to get a tier 1 player. And plus, the thing is, if you don't get hurries, Hutchinson wasn't getting a lot of sacks. He was getting a lot of hurries. So I would say if it was somebody different than Hutchinson, like if let's say this is like Micah Parsons, then I'm doing this for sure. But some people like Hutchinson better than Parsons. I don't know how you feel about that.
No, and I think it's like the new shiny toy. Like Hutchinson's obviously like long term the best asset in all of this trade. But like you said, and I kind of pushed Landry off to the side, just being like not probably the least enticing piece of this, but Landry actually had more points than Hutchinson did last year. He had 15 sacks, whereas Hutchinson only had 10. So again, depending on your IDP scoring, you have a proven commodity in Landry, which isn't a flashy play, but with playing 13 in a 12-team league, that's a lot of players being played. Highsmith obviously is a great piece, especially when TJ Watt's there. Their defense is going to be better. And then who knows on draft day what that 203 is going to look like. You might be getting thrown better offers for the 203, when that pick is on the clock. So
yeah, I agree with that for sure. So that's our advice there, David. If you want to give some more context, feel free to put something in there. But going back to the other deal here, I think that for me, I think Jahan Dotson is definitely an interesting player, but I think you should be able to. I don't think that you could get Patrick Queen for Jahan Dotson. If you're trying to acquire Patrick Queen, I don't see why that Queen owner would trade for Jahan Dotson. I think, like you said, I think they'd want more of a proven commodity. I think Dotson's is more of a project than anything else. So I'm with you there. I think it'd be tough. I'm trying to think. Can you think of another player that Chase could provide the Queen that you think would be fair value?
Well, I guarantee. So let me ask you this: if Chase wakes up tomorrow morning and an offer is in his inbox for his Jahan Dotson for the other players, Patrick Queen, are you accepting?
Yes.
Oh, okay, okay. And
Would
that's
you
kind of the
agree?
point. And I was on board with this before. If I give up Jahan Dotson and I can get Patrick Queen, I'm all in on
Yeah.
that. So, not knowing Chase's roster, I don't know, what kind of players he has to deal, what his depth looks like, you know, what the scoring is like. Is it pretty balanced? Whereas Patrick Queen's going to be, you know, scoring as much as like a starting top 24 wide receiver. If that's the case, Jahan Dotson, that's an easy deal.
So let's go to the next one there. I agree with you there. And if you have comments, just like David did, put them below. We're happy to give you some advice. So Kai reached out. He said he just traded Kobe Turner and Yamin Davis for the 309, the 509, and the 6, all in 2024. And then it's a 12-team Superflex tight end premium league, 45 roster plus 6 taxi squads, starting 11 IDP and 9 offense. So what do you think about that trade?
Well, Kobe Turner is a great piece, but I guarantee he did not draft him with any pick higher than the 309. If he did, he has got a crystal ball and knows way more about IDP fantasy than anyone has. Kobe Turner was just like a revelation. Like no one saw that coming. Every rankings from all across the industry had Kobe Turner as a piece, but never what he was. So Jamin Davis, he's been doing a lot of Need for Speed training. He's trying out for the new Fast and the Furious 24 movie, so he's dealing with some speeding ticket issues and things like that. So getting rid of him is a great move, especially since they brought in like literally everybody to play linebacker for the Commanders right now. Between Frankie Louvu, they signed Bobby Wagner, and unless they're going to be doing a lot of 3 linebacker looks, Jamin Davis is not going to see the field. So I think the pick side of this wins hands down, especially with only having 45 roster spots, technically 51. But that starts to get a little tight, like you're looking at those players. And I think when you're getting towards the end of making your roster cuts and down to 45 players like Kobe Turner are some of those like really hard cuts. You don't want to cut them. But getting the picks that he did, I think are great assets. And those are all moves that on the day of the draft, you can package those up and maybe move up to get, maybe into the second round if you package all 3 of those picks up, possibly with another player. So I think that's a great move by Kai.
I was trying to follow you there. I'm like, Need for Speed. What's he going on there?
Yeah.
But I didn't know that. But I'm with you. I think Yamin Davis, his fantasy value has come to an end. Unless he gets a shot with another team, he's done with the Commanders. Like you said, it's a new coaching staff, new regime change. That means the previous coaching staff who invested in him are no longer there. So to me, that his value then plummets. And you've got Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louvu now in the fold. So I think as a result, things are in rough shape. So I'm actually going to disagree with you, though, on this. I think I'd rather – I understand – hey, get whatever you can for Yamin Davis. But, I don't know, Kobe Turner showed a lot of flash. I think he had 9 sacks, if I remember off the top of my head. And defensive tackle, if it's an 11 IDP, you're probably starting some interior defensive linemen. Now, could he not be as good without Aaron Donald? That's the big question mark that you've got to figure out. But even if you tried to replace him at defensive tackle, who are you hoping to get? Maybe at the 309? Maybe Byron Murphy is still there? Maybe. I'm not sure. So, or I like Jerzon Newton a lot. I'd rather have Jerzon Newton over Kobe Turner, but do I know? That's why I think I would wait. I don't see any reason to make this trade now without knowing who's on the board. So I probably would have not done this trade personally.
I think you nailed it. Yeah. I think you nailed it there with Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald is like a legit difference maker on the field. Like he's getting double and triple teamed, making everybody's job on that defensive unit much easier. It'll just be interesting to see what happens now without Aaron Donald there. Now all of a sudden Kobe Turner is going to get a lot of attention because, like you said, who else is playing defensive line? You know, they've got Bobby Brown, they've got Deshaun Johnson. Not exactly names that scare opposing offensive line. So now all of a sudden, now instead of double and triple teaming a player like Aaron Donald, hey, now we can focus our attention on Kobe Turner. Maybe he doesn't have the season he did last year. And, you know, like, and just for me personally, I think like dynasty trades are all about getting value. And so clearly Kobe Turner wasn't a player that Kai probably drafted with a 309 pick, a 509 pick. Maybe he got him as a late round flyer and something like that, but I think that's a great deal. So I'll agree to disagree with you on that one. So.
All right. Well, Kai's got something else to say. He says, "What do you think about Bobby Spillane? What is he worth in a 12-team Superflex tight end premium? Trying to sell him for an early fourth, but no interest."
I think Kai's.
This is your guy. If I'm not mistaken,
yeah.
Jeff.
I'm a huge Robert Spillane fan. I was on him last season as a buy low candidate in the draft kit and stuff like that. He was one of just those guys that were brought in, and now he's playing for Antonio Pierce, who gave Spillane all the praise about being the guy, and he's just like the lunch pail guy. He's the face that defense wants to be. So he's definitely going to get a lot of run. There's a lot of rumors about the Vegas team trading up for a quarterback, and if they do that, they're going to not have any draft picks to address any other needs, which there are plenty of needs on the Raiders team right now. And Spillane is going to continue to get a lot of run. The Raiders are a team that invested heavily this offseason in the defensive line. You know, they brought in a lot of players through free agency. That's going to make Spillane's job so much easier than it was just a season ago. You know, they made the acquisition of Christian Wilkinson, who's like a man eater. They still have Crosby there. Malcolm Kuntz really started to show up at the end of last season. I just think that he's going to be the player that's going to be well worth the fourth. And if your league mates aren't interested in a fourth round pick, I think that's their loss. I personally wouldn't give him away for a fourth. I would probably want something more than that. Spillane finished as like the top 8 linebacker last season. So if I'm trading away a top 8 linebacker who lost nothing, only gained, I feel, in his defensive scoring abilities from a season ago, I'm not selling for a fourth. So I think it's a blessing that your team didn't accept that. So I'm keeping him.
So I'm not as excited about him as you are, but you are like the Robert Spillane fan club over there. So
I've never seen Robert Spillane and me in the same room at the same time. Just saying. So,
so I would say he's got 1 year left with the Raiders, then his contract expires. I think at that point, he's either like 29 or 30. I would say after that, he might be kaput. That to me is my concern. So he's a short term. So if I'm a competing team, he's a guy that I would be interested in the linebacker spot. I would say I would acquire him for no more than a third. I think a fourth actually sounds like a decent value to me. But if you want to say a low end third, I could understand that. He's not the most flashy guy. It's not like, oh, I just traded for, even Patrick Queen, who we talked about, right? Is like a little more like, oh yeah, Patrick Queen. So I think that's the tough part.
And I think, like, you kind of said it too, Steve, when you're looking at acquiring players, as an IDP manager, we shouldn't be investing heavily or spending a lot for IDP assets at any position just because the turnover rate is so much. Like, I'm sure Kai and many other managers that own Spillane didn't really invest a lot. He was probably maybe a waiver wire, maybe he was a throw-in, on a trade. And now he's ascended to this level of being like a missing piece for probably a few teams that are like contending. Like you said, if I'm a contending team and I'm a linebacker away, like a linebacker 2 or a 3, maybe even my second flex guy away, a third is easily first Blaine. Because if I do well, that third is a late third anyway.
Right.
You look at this
That's
draft
true.
class. You look at this draft class. You just said it just a moment ago. What are you going to draft at the end of the third round? There's not any defensive players that are going to make a difference this year. A player like Spillane and his potential to repeat what he did last season, easily worth a third for me. So if Kai's listening or watching or listening, like, yeah, don't settle for a fourth. I think, as things move on, what did he finish last season as? Yeah, he finished as a top 8 in Big 3 scoring. So for a player that you got for no investment, that's smart IDP football right there.
So David has come back and chimed in. David, thanks so much. David says, when making deals with elite offensive talent, how do you value when an IDP player gets tossed in while negotiating? Send an offer of Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, Jonathan Taylor, and Mark Andrews for Josh Allen and Bijan. He then said that they countered adding Will Anderson. And I figured I wasn't going to let an IDP player stop the deal, so accepted.
I personally agree with David here. That last statement, I think, is what hangs up a lot of deals sometimes is you shouldn't let an IDP player hold up a deal. It sometimes hurts to let a player go like Will Anderson's caliber, but there's going to be another Will Anderson. And if you go back to your league scoring from the last 2 or 3 years, just take a look at who the top 12 are at each position from year to year to year, and you're going to see a lot of different names. If you go to the offensive side and you look back the last 3 years, you go from year to year, you're not going to see as many different names there because there's so much more consistency from the offensive piece. There's so many variables that go into the defensive side of the ball. New defensive coordinators, a draft piece comes in. They shift alignment, especially in the secondary where you see players like their box alignment is a huge piece of this. Like the secondary players, like Derwin James is an awesome piece to have and roll out every week, but he's a player that it's more value of name. Like if you can put him into a piece like to get a deal done, yeah, it's terrible to lose a player like Derwin James, but there's another Derwin James on the waivers, and sometimes they score better and it costs you nothing, just like what Kai did with Robert Spillane. Like, yeah, Patrick Queen's an awesome player. It's great to have, but you know what? I can get a fourth and get a player like Robert Spillane who does just as much, and it didn't cost me anything. So I totally am on board here with David, not letting the IDP piece hold up a trade.
I think it really depends on your scoring. Okay, so I'll give you a for instance, right? So the one league that I'm in that includes IDP, it's a salary and contract league. So it's got offense and IDPs. And, when it comes down to it, you've got, for again, it depends. So my league is more balanced. So you've got in the draft with Aiden Hutchinson and Thibodeau, Hutchinson went 2 and Thibodeau went 3 in that draft. I'm trying to remember who went 1. It was probably some quarterback. What draft class was that?
Well, that was 23, 22's draft class.
No, it was 22. I could figure it out pretty quickly. I'm just trying to, for context sake.
As an offensive piece, was it like Breece Hall? Was it a Kenneth Walker? Was it a
Drake London? So Drake London went 1.
Okay.
Hutchinson went 2. Thibodeau went 3. And then you had Breece Hall 4.
Okay.
So, anyways, I say that to say that for my league, like Will Anderson would not be a throw-in. I traded up to get Will Anderson in the 7th at the 7th pick. So because it's balanced, for me, it's like I'm not. It's a valuable piece. So he's not just like an add-on. So it really depends. In your league, if defense isn't weighed as heavily, then it's one. I would view them as almost like a cherry on top. And that's the fun thing with IDP when you include it in your leagues. And then for those who are watching, you probably have enjoyed this fact. But when you have even IDP, but a full IDP roster, it allows trading to happen so more easily because you have so many more pieces to work with. If you're this, in a typical dynasty league where you only have offense, you only have so much to work with. But when you and me, Jeff, when we're like right there for a trade, we add like an IDP player here or there, boom, 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 the deal's done. So there's a lot more wiggle room. So, I think I would encourage you to look at your scoring. I mean, for me, Will Anderson I would not consider him a throw-in. I consider him a top 5 edge rusher, in dynasty IDP leagues. So, but I mean, this is a big deal that you just did. So,
yeah,
he definitely fits the bill with everything else going on.
Yeah, so it looks like he got Josh Allen and the Bijan piece, and so he traded away. Is that your understanding too?
That's what I was trying to understand. When he says they countered by adding Will Anderson. So if they were like, hey, here, take Will Anderson too, I would be like, well, thank you very much. You know what I mean? If you had to give him up, I might have been more against this type of move because you gave up. There was quite a lot that was given away here.
Yep.
In order to do it. And I think Will Anderson is the type of player, especially with Danielle Hunter there now. I think Will Anderson could really take the next step with Danielle Hunter there in the fold. So, but it's one of those things that I think, depending on your league settings, it's not easy. And that's why, we have a show like this where we talk about IDP trades, because there's so many different value charts. People talk about what's a fair trade, what's not on offense. But when you incorporate IDP, it definitely changes the game. All right, so let's go to the next one here. So, Axton Harding, he has a 12-team PPR, half-point tight end premium super flex. You start 9 offense, you 9 IDP. Traded Derek Carr, Nick Bosa, Christian McCaffrey in the 303 for Jared Goff, Zaire Franklin, I believe that's Quinnen Williams, Evan Ingram, and Robert Spillane. They just knew that you were coming on, and we're going to be talking Bobby Spillane. What do you think? What are your thoughts about this deal?
I really have a hard time personally trading offensive pieces for defensive pieces. Trading a player of McCaffrey's caliber, he is a weekly winner, by himself. For me, it's really hard. And I see that, Axton just jumped on and he just said he got the CMC side. So I think he just destroyed this deal then. I was trying to put it in a nice way because I know Axton and I didn't want to kind of throw him under the bus on this one. But anytime that you can get a player of McCaffrey's caliber for defensive pieces, like we said earlier, if you go to your league scoring from year to year and stuff like that, you're going to see a lot of different names that show up. On the offensive side, you're not going to see as much turnover. To get McCaffrey and Bosa, who's probably an elite option at the defensive line position, for Goff and Carr, and it's kind of a moot point. It's kind of a flip-flop. But basically to trade this away to get the 3 linebackers, Franklin, Williams, and Spillane, for a player like McCaffrey and the 303, I think that's a huge win. That's definitely something I'm always trying to advocate for, is trading defensive pieces for offensive pieces. You can always find defensive pieces to replace.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm just kind of looking at the team composition. I would agree. I definitely lean towards the side of Axton here. I think if it was a defensive tackle required league, I may feel a little bit differently. Because Quinnen Williams is the number 1 defensive tackle. There's no question about it in my mind, or at least he's in the top 3, if otherwise.
Could that be Quincy Williams too?
No, it's Quinnen. It's Quinnen.
Oh, is it Quinnen? Okay.
Yeah, it's Quinnen. But if you look at the roster, it's defensive line. So you could play any defensive lineman. So with that being the case, to me, in a 12-team league, it's kind of more of a shallow league. Maybe you'll probably be able to find defensive line pretty easily if you only have to start 2. So to me, Quinnen Williams is not enough unless there's some sort of advantage I'm missing for a defensive tackle is getting a bonus, but I don't see that. So Bosa definitely over Williams. Evan Ingram, I think you trade him at the right time. He had a really good year this past season. I think he could continue to do well with the Jaguars, especially with Calvin Ridley no longer there. But I don't think he's a piece that you have to have. You've got McCaffrey, who, like you said, Jeff, obviously he's a stud. I'm a little lower on Goff, so I'm not so worried about Goff compared to Carr. And you've got some good linebackers. That's the thing. You already got Foye, Aluakon on your roster, and you got Bobby Okereke as well. So you don't really need. You probably picked up Bobby Spillane for next to nothing. And then, Zaire Franklin maybe too, right? Those guys are just kind of came in the fold. So you're talking about acquiring guys like Nick Bosa and Christian McCaffrey for guys I didn't really think you probably had to invest that much in. So I think well done.
It's embarrassing when you really listen to his linebacker core. Like if and he traded those players away, and yet he still has Foye Oluokun, who is arguably the linebacker one. He has been for the last couple seasons. They just gave him an extension. There's no reason to think that he's not going to continue to do that.
I was not expecting that, by the way. That was kind of crazy. For his age and stuff, I didn't think. Good for him. Good and good for the IDP as well.
Yeah, my Chad Muma shares cried a little bit when I saw that, but I guess we'll go with that. And then, he still had, like you said, Bobby Okereke as well. Like, he's arguably a top 12 linebacker in his own right. So this was, easily trading from a position of depth to a position of need. He just made himself an easy contender in this league for the next season, at least maybe two, depending on how McCaffrey holds up.
Yeah, I agree for sure. And then let's see here. What else we got here? We've got I've been able to get good depth at linebacker, Fred Warner, Bobby Okereke, and Quincy Williams. I don't know what that's from. That might be I don't know what that's from.
Yeah, there was a Reddit trade offer. I thought I captured it all.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah, so the Reddit trade was we run a modified league with defensive line, linebacker, DB, and IDP roster spot. We're a dynasty rookie draft league as well. I've been able to get good depth at linebacker, Warner, Okereke, Quincy Williams, EJ Speed. So I've been fielding some potential trade offers. I'm currently being offered Devin Lloyd and a team's 2025 second round pick. It'll be top 5 for Bobby Okereke. He was an absolute stud last year, number 3 linebacker based on our point system. So it feels tough to give him up. What do you think about that trade?
Initially looking at that, like, again, just kind of like accident head with all of his depth. This is, Fred Warner, Okereke, Quincy Williams, Speed. These are all really highly drafted names. I love the idea of turning your roster over, especially on the defensive side, especially if you can get a player like Devin Lloyd, who really ascended last season, and a really nice piece on top of it, a second round pick in 2025, which could be used in a trade yet this year to move up and acquire a player to help you out this season, or just to sit on it next year. A second next year is going to be a great piece as well. Again, depending on your scoring, even a balanced scoring league is one heavily toward the offense, just because of the turnover on the defensive side. I think this is an easy accept to trade Bobby Okereke for Devin Lloyd to get the second round pick on top of that.
Yeah, Jeff, I agree with you. I think it's a drop of the bucket. Might be the first one that we actually agree on so far tonight, but I'm with you. If you get Devin Lloyd, who I think is solid as well, and then get a 2025 second to boot, I think you're doing real well.
Yeah, and it's not like he's without linebackers. It's not like Okereke is his only linebacker. He's got some potential pieces there waiting in the wings. Fred Warner is nothing to scoff at. Quincy Williams is a solid LB2, LB3 at least. And EJ Speed showed last year he can definitely step in for Shaq Leonard and played very, very well. And Devin Lloyd even played extremely well throughout the season. He in his rookie season, he got benched, he lost his job, but he came back and took it over. Last season, he was really one of those players that really was a solid piece throughout and scored really, really well. He ended up with well over 100 tackles, close to 120 last season. So
So that does it for all the trades that we had tonight for the IDP trade show. So if you have any comments, now is the time. If you want us to give any reaction, you got to put something in there. Do we give the folks at home some time to process their trades? Do we talk about anything else?
Yeah, I'll throw you. I'll put you on the spot here, Steve. Who is a player right now that you're trying to acquire on the defensive side of the ball?
Wow, that's a. Whew. Well, I mean, if Will Anderson's going to be a throw-in, I'll take him. He's a guy. I mean, off the top of my head, I want to say that Daniil Hunter, it was a stat by John Macri out of over at PFF, was saying that I think Daniil Hunter might have had 17 sacks over the past 2 seasons or something. That due to his pressures led to other players getting a sack. So, so I think for a guy like Anderson who wasn't able to get as many sacks. I think he could have a really, really good year. So he'd be a guy off the top of my head. I'm trying to think about some other players that I would like.
As you're thinking, just to kind of piggyback on that thought, how scary is Houston going to be this season? They went out on the defensive side of the ball and just brought in. They really overhauled that defensive, which was a great ascending defense last season. Will Anderson, they had the linebackers that were kind of stepping up. They moved on from Denzel Perryman, but they brought in
Aziz
Al-Shahir, which is probably an upgrade at minimum, a younger, faster version, and then they have this draft that's coming up. And then today they made a trade to get Stephon Diggs, which, if that offense continues to put up points, that only going to help players like Will Anderson and Daniil Hunter, because now teams are going to have to put the ball up. Now they're going to have to throw because they're going to be behind in games. And if you're a fan of game script like I am, that just helps the defensive players out because now they can pin those ears back and go after the quarterback. So you got a player like Daniil Hunter on one side, Will Anderson, who's a throw-in on the other side. It's just going to be, it's going to be a fun team to watch. So hopefully
on paper, this team is looking really exciting. And, I am I'm happy for the Texans fans. I mean, they were in a wasteland there for a few years under David Culley and Lovie Smith. It just seemed like nothing was going to get right. And then they draft Stroud and they bring in DeMeco Ryans and everything just turns around. I mean, this team is definitely on the rise. On paper, they look great. I'll be curious to see if they're able to, put pen to paper and really get this thing, underway. I mean, I am a Bills fan, so I've had a lot of time to process this. I was not anticipating Diggs to get traded because of the financial ramifications of the move. So I was very shocked by that. I think that I thought the writing was on the wall. I think he was going to be gone by next year because we saw that he wasn't restructured. That's usually, they're not willing to kick the can down the road with a signing bonus. You kind of know that the players on the long-term plans, and Bills had some major cap space to move. So, it may be a year earlier than I thought, but I'm a believer in Bean. I think he will do something, and we'll see how this unfolds.
Yeah, it was interesting. As soon as the trade went through, I thought of Jay Colhagen because he's a huge Houston Texans fan and stuff like that, and even chatting and listening to him talk today, he kind of had mixed feelings. Like, Diggs is a great player, but he also brings some baggage. Clearly, Buffalo was willing to get rid of him if they ate as much cap space as they did to move on from him and really not get a lot back. So it'll be interesting to see, if they can keep Diggs happy in that locker room and stuff like that. So kind of a mixed bag of emotions, I think. So
him and Mixon, by the way. Yeah. Brian Mixon isn't necessarily the easiest guy to get along with either, supposedly.
Yeah, I hope Stroud can kind of be strong and, keep making strides like he did his rookie season because it was pretty special. So
that was the IDP Trade Show, the April edition. And Jeff Pomazal, thank you for joining me today. This was a lot of fun. We're able to talk about all these different trades and looking forward to the trades to come.
I appreciate you having me on. I love talking trades all the time. My Twitter box is always lit up with people asking questions, so keep them coming. I love to trade. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. You're welcome. And he's at Jeff Pomazal When are you going to change it to at Boobam? Is Boobam not available?
I was at Boobam 131.
Oh, you were?
And then I was told by a really smart individual, Josh Raymer, that I needed to rebrand myself so I was easier to find and identify. So
there you go. Shout out to Josh. There you go.
Yep.
Very nice. Well, Jeff, thanks again for joining. Thank you for all those who joined at home today. We appreciate it. We'll be back again next month. Take care.